Hi, Diana Fright here. I am the host of the Gooder Podcast, where I get to talk with the powerhouse women in the food, beverage, and wellness categories about their journeys to success and their insights on the industry. This episode is brought to you by Retail Voodoo. Retail Voodoo is a brand development firm providing strategic brand and design services for brands in the food. Clients include Starbucks, Kind, REI, PepsiCo, HighKey, and many other market leaders. So if your goal is to crush your competition by driving growth and disrupting the marketplace with new and innovative ideas, give us a call and let's talk. You can find out more on retail-voodoo.com. Well, I am very excited to have you all meet Patti Doyle, CEO of Rumi Spice today. Patti oversees the brand's mission of bringing flavorful, ethically sourced, and socially responsible spices from Afghanistan to worldwide customers. An accomplished and innovative top B2B and B2C marketing executive, prior to joining Rumi Spice, Patti held a mixture of executive and senior marketing roles for a digital content platform and a number of food and beverage brands, including Kraft Foods and PepsiCo. Well, hello, Patti. How are you?
Hi, Diana. I'm great. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. Where are you located?
Yeah, so I am in the heart of the Midwest in Chicago, Illinois.
Chicago. You know what? Chicago, Illinois right now is the innovation hub of food and beverage, particularly in the natural space. It is an explosion.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many good things happening here. I think it's one of those things too. I mean, there's just an amazing amount of, startups, scale ups, brands that have, call it quote unquote, made it. But because of that, I think the ecosystem just keeps feeding on itself.
Yeah.
So it's a fun place to be doing what we're doing.
Yeah. And you've got a built-in infrastructure that's just legacy old for distribution and that sort of thing. But I will say, I don't know if you know the hatchery, but I think the work that's being done that Natalie is doing over there and her team is really catapulting. I think that's part of it.
Yeah. So we are actually hatchery members.
You are?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we certainly were beyond probably sort of, what you call startup stage, but I am such a big fan and advocate of everything they have going on, like the resources, the networking. They recently did, sort of a local or like a regional buyer event just for buyers in sort of driving distance for us. And I agree with you. Like, I can't say enough good things. And, even as you continue to grow, they're just a phenomenal resource to work with and just a great team of people. So,
yes, I love it. Yeah. Well, so let's talk a little bit about what you're up to. First of all, you're at Rumi Spice. Tell us a little bit about the brand, what it is and what it stands for.
Yeah. So really, like at the simplest level, I could say we're a spice company. But really, we are so much more than that. And we can also talk a little bit about where we're headed and what the future looks like for us. But what we aim to do is create jobs and really a sustainable source of economic support for women and farmers in Afghanistan by sourcing these amazing agricultural products that come out of this country. It's a really incredible growing region, and the quality of what grows there is just phenomenal. And it's wonderful too, because it's very unadulterated. We wild harvest a lot of the products we grow that aren't sort of farmed like saffron is. And so it means like they're not getting pesticides. They're not any sort of like franken seeds or anything like that. They're just really natural, flavorful products. And so, part of it is just showcasing that so that we create demand for them. The more demand we can create, the more products we're going to source, the more people can be a part of our farming. And, my goal is to really figure out how we create connections through food to the vibrancy of this area. And I think, for many people, if you ask them about Afghanistan, they're going to think of either, war or violence, turmoil of some sort. And, that certainly has been part of the history. but there's this incredibly rich story as it relates to the people, their food, and their culture. That is what we want to help share through the products we bring to market.
Now, so I'm glad that you brought up like the history a little bit. I wonder how much of the like the founder story. Tell us a little. I mean, like that's to me the special part of Rumi Spice. Can you share that with people's like what how did it get creative? Why does it even exist?
Yeah. So I love talking about how we got started. And, in full disclosure, I call myself founder 2.0 because I was not sort of the boots on the ground when we got started. I took over from our founders when they decided to sort of pursue some other paths. But three of our original founders were all in the Army. So they're Army veterans and were serving in Afghanistan. So that's actually where they met. And while they were over there, they got to know, some of the folks there and especially some of the farmers. And they were the ones who really started to understand the beautiful products that were being grown there, but that the farmers and the foragers had no real path to market. So it wasn't, this was not as simple as, calling someone or sending 10,000 emails to try to get someone to buy your product. They really just didn't have that mechanism to reach other markets outside of the country. And so it really started by our founders bringing back, we started with saffron. That was our original product, and bringing satchels of it back to sort of vet it here, both, from a quality standpoint, but then, we started by just bringing it to chefs, both here and then in Boston, because one of our founders was out there, and having them try it. And they were really the ones who understood and could just see the quality of the product. Besides the fact saffron itself is a product that gets adulterated frequently because it's so expensive. But, when you steep it in water and you see the flavor and the color that's coming out of it, the chefs are really the first ones to say, oh, this is amazing. Like, this is a really high quality product that you have. And so that really started us on our path. And so from that, it really was, starting to package it so it was size for retail, so for home use and for consumers. And eventually that led to us getting into Whole Foods regionally. And so they were really our first, major brick and mortar customer. Yeah. And, so that was, really the path we started on with them. And so I'm so fortunate because they created all the relationships that we still have today. So we have sort of a lead, what I call like farmer partner we work with, who helps interface with all the farmers that are in our network, who helped us set up our processing facility, which is where all the women work. And so that was really the foundation of, how we got started, and that sort of, first half of our trajectory in terms of establishing the brand and, bringing our initial products over.
That's so cool. So dare I ask, what is the real, like, how did you get involved with Rumi? Like, I feel, is there a personal connection there?
So I will say it is what I think of as like all good moments that have happened in my career have happened from the awesome networks I'm a part of, which could be like a whole separate conversation.
Yeah,
but I'm a big believer in the power of the network. I'm sort of fortunate through, whether it's the places I went to school or having spent my whole career in Chicago and things like that, those networks and the people you meet are the ones that are going to help chart that path for you. And so actually through one of my alumni relationships, I met one of our board members, and they at the time were looking for someone, as the last of the founders was stepping away from the business and, sort of trying to figure out what to do. It's a little bit of an unusual stage, that we were at to bring in someone new. And it just was, I had been looking, I was somewhere else, but sort of knew that trajectory was probably winding down. And I talked to him and then the rest of the board members and learned, this incredible story of what was happening here. And, to me, it was sort of the perfect intersection. I love being in the food space.
Yeah.
Just personally, I love to cook. I grew up in an Italian Irish household. And so food was always a part of what we did. So I just love it from a personal standpoint. But then also the idea of, really being, especially at like this point in my career, being a part of something mission based where I
Mhm.
get up every morning and I know like what I do matters. And I find that
Yes.
very, it's both exhilarating, it's a lot of pressure, but it's also so satisfying to think of, at least being able to contribute in some way to the path that the women that are part of our processing are on, and the farmers as well. So,
Mhm.
but it was sort of a network connection that led us to cross paths and have that initial
Yeah.
conversation. And it was sort of as we all talked, it was one of those moments where you're like, oh, this is the right fit. This is happening, and that was that. Um,
Yes.
Interestingly enough, that was sort of late summer of 2019. And if you had told me then that, 6 months
Right.
later, we would be hit with a pandemic and I would have spent more of my time now managing this company in a pandemic than not in a pandemic, I would have never wrapped my head around that. But, that's been its sort of own interesting journey as well, as I think about, how so many of us have obviously been in uncharted territory, but how that would play out.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious for a business like yours where you're talking about wild foraging. And I hadn't considered thinking of this through, but I'm just curious how you were able to work with those farmers during the pandemic. I guess the
Mhm.
wild foraging allowed for them. They didn't quite have the restrictions that you would have kind of in more of a factory setting where you were
Yeah.
packing. So maybe more of the challenges were on the US side once we were getting to distribution and finding packaging than it was for working with those women over there. But I could be wrong.
Yeah.
What were the challenges in that scenario, and
No,
how'd you overcome them?
yeah, you're definitely thinking, like, as you talked that through, you're thinking about it the right way. We really didn't have, I would say something sort of COVID specific that impacted our ability to source products on the
Mhm.
ground and things like that. And, our team stayed healthy and safe. And to your point, where we source not all, but a majority of our products in is sort of the west side of Afghanistan, which is the Herat region, which is
Yeah.
where a lot of the saffron grows. And so obviously, to your point, lots of space, we're outdoors, that's all sort of was helpful as we were going through that. We really faced some challenges, and, this is much more along the lines of what so many other
Yeah.
makers were facing. But we do eventually, our product comes to the US on a boat. Um,
Right.
and we ship out of Turkey. And so
Yeah.
the challenge with that was the boats, as they go that direction to pick up product, are passing through Italy. And if you remember, Italy was, sort of
Yes.
the not the core of what was happening, but like
No, but
had
it was
so many
bananas
issues
there.
at the start of
Yeah.
the pandemic and it was when, we didn't know how to manage this virus. We didn't know how it was being transmitted. So the challenge was ships would stop there and just, getting them so they felt like they were sort of satisfactorily disinfected. That was taking weeks and
Oh my
obviously adding
gosh.
expense, and all that sort of thing. And it was the great unknown then. And so there was, there was sort of nothing we could do about it. We started to obviously, I think like a lot of other folks, like bring more inventory over and things like that. And then, the other side of that was as we then got through the pandemic, we faced the supply chain pressures that everyone else did. So the combination of, rising costs where that sea freight container that we would bring over, the cost of that rose, 3 to 4x what we would
Right.
pay. And like
Mhm.
we're smallish, growing, but as far as that's a lot to absorb. And then, at the same time, everything else was in short supply. So I
Right.
have a great operations team. And so, we were scrambling, like, where do we find glass to pack our products in? And
Yes.
can we get enough lids? And, there's a point where we changed the color of the lids. And we said,
Yeah.
if someone on shelf is going to complain because it's a black lid versus a gold lid,
Yeah.
like we got bigger issues. And so
Yeah.
like, we went through all those things that everyone else did over the course of the pandemic, and navigated most of it without too many issues. I think the interesting part to me, versus, if you think of the huge suppliers that have been talking about supply chain issues, we could be a little scrappier. So if we couldn't get the full quantity of jars we needed, we said, okay, we'll take like 3 pallets. You got that?
Yeah.
We'll take it.
All right.
Or, we have to ship them here first. We'll do that. So that's, I think, a little bit of where if you were smaller, you could be a little flexible versus, folks that are shipping over thousands of pieces of furniture, massive amounts of packaging and things like that. So, but really our challenges were sort of in that front similar to everyone else versus issues on the ground.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious if you could, like, I know how you shared with us a little bit about your networking and how you came to Rumi. I kind of want to step back a little bit further, like you started out at IRI, is that right?
Yeah.
So you're a numbers person.
I am.
And you kind of made your way through Craft and a couple of other places. And here you are. Well, maybe the previous place that you were in was when you started working with them at one point, but I'm assuming this is kind of a smaller operation. And I'm wondering, when you're looking back at any of at your kind of your history and then marrying it with who you are, I wonder what those pivotal moments were that you might go, yeah, I knew that eventually, or I kind of, maybe that one moment kind of pushed me here. Can you think back to any of those times? I'm going to go, yeah, that was really important. And this effectively pushed me towards an opportunity like Rumi.
Yeah. So, I think for me, especially if I look back at where I started and, to your point, I started in the marketing research space, but a very analytical side of it. My undergraduate degree is in mathematics. Most people, when I say that, like I get a really funny response back. They're like, oh, like sort of, why would you do that? Or like, can't comprehend, but it was a good fit for me at the time. And even when I made that decision, I went to school to like be a little business major, and I called my parents one day and I said, I don't know if I like all these business classes. I think I want to study math. And my parents said, go learn it. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And so, really supportive. It wasn't about, oh, you have to be on this career path. It was about find something you like and learn. That's what it was. My parents obviously great that way and said, yeah, go for it. Be a great math major. But it still led me back to business, and that all worked. Maybe, I don't know if worked out is the right way to say it, but, got me to a great place, but, gave me a great foundation. I'm a big believer in numbers, just in terms of, knowing how they impact any part of your business. But, for me, having done, I call it like 2 stints in big food, both at what is now Kraft Heinz and then at PepsiCo, I think some people that have gone from like those experiences and then have chosen to do something, whether it's more entrepreneurial or maybe they've worked then on the services side or things like that. Sometimes I hear people look back and sort of, not be happy with those experiences or something like that. And I loved them, and I credit them with, giving me such a strong foundation to operate from. Like you work in some of those organizations and you're managing $1 billion business as a very young person. And for me, it helped give me a great skill set that, I feel like I've just built upon it, every stage of my career. But I think when you talk about sort of pivotal moments, I think, there was this point, and I'm not even going to go into what brand it was, but where, we were having a conversation about basically how to take product out of what we were selling, to make it more cost effective. But it was just like the antithesis of what you wanted good food to be. And I think, there was a moment there where I just thought to myself, ooh, like, it didn't sit right. Like, is this really how I feel about food? And, not that I think you and your job have to be 100% aligned, but I think
Mhm.
certainly much more satisfying. And so, that was certainly one of those moments that gave me pause, to think about what I was doing, which then led to a bit of a turn. And, similarly, I think I had another point where, lots of good things come from big organizations in terms of resources, I think learning access. I had, met incredible people, both like that I work with and, celebrities and things like that, that have all made it very enjoyable. But, I think I also hit a point where to make every decision required, so much selling and pre-selling and water cooler
Yeah.
conversations, all of that. And again, some people absolutely thrive with that, but I think I hit a wall with that where, I felt confident enough in both my personal skill set and my business savvy and being able to do that, that was probably then like another jumping off point for me to
Yeah.
really start to prioritize smaller organizations or organizations where I could, ideally sort of share what I had learned
Yeah.
and transfer that to an organization. So, for me, those were the types of moments that, just I would call it shifted my thinking so that I would look for different opportunities or be open to them.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I love that. Well, when I think of leadership, and I think of what you've been doing for the last couple of years and those moments that inspired you to kind of move into something where you had more of a say, um, I'm thinking about possible mentors, and there's going to be like kind of two sides of this conversation. The first is, are there any mentors that have that have provided you this kind of growth opportunity? And then the flip side is, how do you like to mentor people as they're going through a path similar to yours?
Yeah. So, the first question in terms of mentors that have really helped me has sort of like two buckets of them, right? So to
Mm-hmm.
me, I have, and it's a core group of I feel like it's like 2 to 3 people now that I will reach out to, rely on, and be oftentimes a sounding board for me.
Mm-hmm.
And as I think about sort of how I use them or engage with them, to me, what is usually so um, sort of obvious after we've connected or had coffee or whatever is what they really are doing is just listening. And they'll certainly provide guidance and coaching and things like that. But it is as much about sometimes like listening and playing back to me what they're hearing as much as saying, oh, have you thought about doing this or have you tried this? And, certainly there's that element of it too. But I think, when I think of the folks that have sort of stayed with me over the years,
Mm-hmm.
it is really folks that have provided that type of support that at the time I think I was like going in, I'm always like asking questions. What do I do? How do I solve this? But they're asking the questions and sort of,
Mm-hmm.
in a certain sense, leading me down a path that I don't even realize, which I
Yeah.
love, and I think that's so valuable. I also am really fortunate, both like as sort of a younger version of me, both my father and then I have an uncle who is very dear to me, who were
Mm.
both spent their careers in business and were always like so giving and gracious of helping me out and
Mm-hmm.
pushing me a little or steering me a bit. And so even just from a sort of family mentorship standpoint, that's been a tremendous part of how I got to where I am. When I think of, now my relationship with other folks,
Yeah.
I think, well, certainly I like to try to emulate what I've seen in people that I've worked with. The
Yeah.
other thing I find, and it's even, I think it's a combination both of folks that have like previously worked for me that I still keep in touch with, or even my own team, which is really trying to push them to think about what they would do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because usually the same sort of thing. They're coming to me with a question or uncertainty or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think when you can flip that and put the onus on them, and I'm never going to leave anybody, like to hang them out to dry or anything like that, but to really have them think through what they would do if they were the, final decision maker, or if, like I was unreached, whatever that might be. And, I like that, to try to see how people can like turn those wheels on their own, and then talk about, maybe they don't get to a place that is exactly right, but then talk about the why, or talk about how to think about it. Or, sometimes maybe they don't have all the information. Maybe they don't see everything that I see, or haven't had the same experiences, but I like that, to sort of watch that thought process and try to help them learn about what to do or where to go through the thinking piece of it, as opposed to saying, like, maybe I do know the answer, but I don't need to tell you. I want you to learn why that is the case. And I even feel like I did have one manager very early on who was like that, which I think stuck with me a lot, as opposed to just, telling people what to do, or things like that, because that's what's going to stick with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. It's interesting to hear you say, I maybe not interesting, but I love hearing you say, you want people to kind of think through and bring the opportunities to them. And I think also that added safety net of being able to know that they can make the decision, have it go sideways, and then know that you've got their back. Well, I mean, nobody wants anything to go sideways, although I'll say that's where some of my biggest learnings have come from professionally. So, it's kind of, I'm excited to hear about that you're open to that approach, because I think it's very easy to have come from the really large organizational structures where there's less tolerance for that, which is weird, because there's so many redundancies in the system that you would think that it would be okay, because you could do a catch. But
no, there's like a way to do things.
Right. And when you're talking about losing 1% market share of something that is like $1 billion brand, like that's that's also something to take into consideration, Yeah. I'm curious, this is a question that could either apply to Rumi or in general, but I'd love to know, when you're looking back at things, like what are you most proud of, like for yourself professionally, or as generally as a human?
Yeah. I probably would say I'm most, proud of growing Rumi right now. I think I have had so many amazing experiences, but this is really the one where I feel like it's touching other humans. And to me, and I think that comes with sort of, multiple different experiences under my belt, but it's it's nice for me to do something that is, when we're fed up or frustrated at the office because something arrived late, or POs didn't get fulfilled, or whatever that might be, the sort of not mundane stuff, but the stuff that sometimes makes us pull our hair out. The flip side of it is, like, because there's a reason behind it, and it's this, intersection where I always say, like, we're measured on two things, like business results and people results. And like being able to impact that people side of it, to me, I'm so proud of that. We've grown our network of farmers, that we've grown our network of women that are a part of harvesting and processing. And, my hope is certainly that we can come up with some ways. There's so many Afghan refugees in the country that as we grow, we can think about how to incorporate them in what we're doing. We don't have that capacity right now, but like I have a huge passion around trying to figure out how to do that. And so we've, been trying to come up with ways that can fit into, our business model, whether that's today or maybe a little bit further down the road. And so that to me is what, this is all about. And it is probably why I'm most proud of what I'm doing right now.
Is there a large Afghani population in Chicago?
I believe, and I probably couldn't tell you the source of this, but I do believe it has
Yeah.
the second largest population outside of the East Coast. I'm not sure if I could actually give you a source for that. So let's all take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But definitely there's I know, strong population here, both of folks that, had
Yeah.
immigrated here a long time ago, but then also
Yeah.
with the number of refugees that came in over the past year, there's quite a large community of them. We have a relatively strong refugee community connection here that provides sort of support beyond what you get, from the government as a refugee. And
Yeah.
so I'm
That's
connected
cool.
with that. And so we've seen, a lot of folks that have come in, recently. So, but there's definitely quite a large number of folks here.
Oh my goodness. That's so
Yep.
cool. Well, tell us what's next for Rumi. What's
Yeah.
what's in the near future?
Yeah. So we have, one of the things, since, we started, we've always been bringing more products to market, right? Both a sort of traditional path for a food company, but also spices turn relatively slowly. And so if we're trying to grow this business and grow demand, it's also a bit about providing people different opportunities to, buy products from us, whether it's in Whole Foods or on our website or, the chefs that we sell to. So, that started with, after we started importing saffron, we started bringing cumin over, and then we added coriander and fennel and some of the spices that are really prominent in the, Afghan agricultural regions, and all have done really well. They're, equally flavorful and really high quality. But, we took some time during the pandemic to really think about, where do we go next, or how do we unlock growth where we're making an even bigger impact? And, that's how we really came to focus on creating these connections through food, right? To the culture of, Afghanistan and, beyond that, sort of the Middle East region, because they share a lot of common sort of food traits. And so we had, our core had been in regular spices. We do a lot of blends as a way to help consumers know how to use them. But to me, that's sort of a different version of the same thing, whether it's we have an Afghan curry braise and things like that, that at least, I think most consumers say, okay, I can take a chicken breast, I can put a spice blend on it, and I can grill it or something, and I can figure out if I like that taste or whatever. But recently, over the summer, we launched a line of seasoned salts. It's sort of our first foray to anything that was just different than what I call spices in jars. And so we launched, a saffron seasoned salt. We have a cumin one, dill seed, all based on our core spices, but made with a really beautiful New Zealand sea salt. As another way for consumers to think about, okay, well, this is a finishing salt. I can sprinkle this on top of a salad, or I can use it as a marinade and things like that. And so that was really our first foray beyond just spices. And I think, some people might say, well, that's still really close in. What is happening there? But for us, they were really successful. And so it was just sort of a good way to dip our toe in the water. And so as we look ahead, over the next, we're the end of August. So we have 2 sets of new product launches that we're doing over the next basically 4 weeks. So one that we're doing at the end of this month, then another that'll happen at Expo East. And they're really about now starting to provide convenience in a little bit of a different format. So we are coming out with some individual packets that will be used in different ways for seasoning and to help create meals and things like that. So I'm not going to go into too much detail because we've got the sort of news embargoed for a few weeks, but that's really,
of course.
I know, what we've got coming up ahead. And so, we'll have, I think, a total of 17 new products between those 2 launches that'll come out.
Oh my gosh, that's huge.
Which is tremendous. I know. And so I've got a team that's been hustling so hard to make it happen. We got the proofs in for the new products last week. And I was literally jumping around the office. I was so excited. And so, that's really going to be how we start to, we talk about, we want to make these connections, but how do we do it? Well, what if suddenly you knew how to create a dish that was something that was cooked in Afghanistan or cooked in, another nearby country in the region. And it was, sort of as simple as we think about making, tacos from a taco packet or a gravy packet or something like that. So we're excited with, I think that is a really pivotal jumping off point to start to introduce consumers to a lot more of the food from the region, but do it in a way that's not overwhelming, or, if they don't know what it is, it's a little bit foolproof and things like that. So, so that's some of the good news ahead. And then it's figuring out what comes next.
Yes. Well, the time is right for that, right? Because the American consumer is really ready for a more global palate. At least, there's a segment that really is. And I think that majority of Americans will get there sooner than later, but it's big enough now where we can really start to put some innovation and put product to market and start satisfying those desires for trial and new ideas.
I agree with you. I mean, I think, partly coming out of the pandemic, I think partly a sort of new generation of home cooks that, just from an early age were exposed to much more glal flavors. They are much more adventurous and willing to experiment. And then for us, I think we're seeing a lot of people that are much more interested in, where their food comes from, or, using their dollars to make a difference at the grocery store. And so, I think that is certainly helpful for brands like us, where it is more than just about the spice itself. It's about where it's coming from, how it's coming from, and, ideally what the impact is from buying our products.
Yeah, that's so fantastic, Patti. Wow. As I mentioned, I don't think this was recorded when I first had Patti on here. So I was just saying, I've been following Rumi, I think, since the very beginning. So a little fan crushing here. Then I get to chat with her. So this has been fun for me. We're getting towards the end of our conversation. There's a couple of questions I like to ask everybody. And the first one is along the lines of trends, not as in trendy, but I'm curious what you are following, whether it's in our industry or not. Can you share that with can you share it with yourself? No. Can you share it with us? What sort of trends are you following right now?
Yeah, I mean, certainly for me, I am a, avid consumer of keeping an eye on, the chefs and everything they're doing from sort of like things in the restaurant space. Practically, I think a lot of us in the food industry know that tends to lead what happens at retail shelves. And I think, we sort of push that envelope of also doing things, trying to obviously get flavors and things like that to folks earlier. And so I'm a big fangirl online of, whether it's watching chefs cook or seeing the creations they're coming with. And then, for me, because, so I've never been to Afghanistan, right? Like it's the unfortunate timing of all this too. No, because
that makes sense.
Of the timing of the pandemic and then the return of the Taliban, it will be a while till that's an option for, I think women from outside of the country to safely travel there. But I am also like a rabid consumer of travel information, and not so much just like vacation travel, but seeing where people are going, what are they writing about, what are the other perspectives that people are seeing, and thinking about how that also for me like impacts, food and the food space and things like that. And so those are sort of the areas when I think of like, either trying to look for trends or see what's happening there. I really enjoy that. Personally, sort of outside of the Rumi space, I'm also like a very, very keen on like thinking about sustainability and the impact we're all making on the earth and how we impact that. And so I also tend to consume a lot and watch a lot of things as it relates to sustainability, because, certainly I'd like to try to think about how we can do that even through our own products. We have a long
Right.
supply chain, so there's a part of that that's consuming some fossil fuels right now that is sort of
Yeah.
not going to change if we want to support our mission. But are there other things we can do that
Mm-hmm.
impact that? So as I look ahead, and I think about what I see in other brands, I think even this week I was sort of looking around at there's folks obviously like Grove Collaborative and Method that are trying
Yes.
to provide you with refills instead of shipping
Yes.
water everywhere and things like that. And
Yes. Yeah.
how do we translate that into what we're doing and things like that? A
Yeah.
lot of answers there.
Oh, I've been to a couple of conferences this year alone when we're talking about reducing the environmental footprint altogether. Are you familiar with Loop? LOOP?
Yes. Oh, I want them to
Yeah,
do
it's
our
pretty
packaging,
cool.
and we're a little too small. We're a little too small right now.
Yeah. Yeah. But eventually, yeah.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Love. I don't necessarily know that what they have right now is going to be the final solution, but what a great experiment. And they're iterative too. Like, they're like, okay, this isn't working. Let's do this. Okay, this isn't working. Let's do this. And other organizations like, I think McDonald's in Canada is working with Tupperware, believe it or not. And they're sending their takeout in Tupperware, and then they have bins all over the place for people to put their Tupperware back in, and it gets cleaned through, industrial process and then reuse over again. So so McDonald's has they have a really bad rap. Their food is really not the healthiest, but when it comes to innovation, they are really smart people, and they're willing to test and they're willing to fail. And I think that's a secret to their success. It's a random.
Yeah.
But let's see here. The other question that I have for you is, are there any other women leaders or rising stars in our category that you're watching that you would like to just give a shout out to for the work that they're doing right now?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, let me think on that one just a little bit.
Yeah. And we can clean this part up here if you need just a moment to think. So there's not.
Okay, super.
Sure.
Oh, it is a lot of pressure.
It's tough because you could list 100 people, I'm sure.
Right.
Might be, they don't even have to be in category. They can be outside of category.
I feel like I should not trust such a blank because I am such a female fangirl in general.
Well, who comes to mind? Right when you who's your first?
Yeah. Well, so here's this is sort of interesting. Who came to mind is someone I just recently met, and who ironically it was through the hatchery, and it's Prateet, and she is one of the founders of IO Foods. And we shared a table last week, and we're doing totally different things. We're doing different categories, whatever. But I sort of also felt a bit of a kindred spirit to their brand because they are also about bringing sort of flavors and experiences that people aren't familiar with to consumers. And so it was so fun for me to also just hear her talk about what's in their products. And they were certainly super spicy for me. I do not do well with really hot things, but I wanted to try them. So I would keep trying them. And I was oh, that's really hot. But that was really good. So I do think that was sort of obviously a more recent experience, but one that was really fun for me to have that interaction, because it does feel like a little bit of it's a different version of what we're doing, but a bit with the same goal in terms of bringing these new flavors to our consumers. Yeah.
Do you know that she used to work at Nielsen?
Oh, I don't know if I knew that.
she worked, I interviewed her for my podcast before. She worked at Nielsen, and IO came out of that, and she was actually doing probably very similar work as what you were doing in IRA. So you guys are maybe a little bit more kindred than you think.
That's so funny.
Isn't that cool? And she is such a sweet human, and her husband is.
Yes.
We met at Expo West in person for the first time, and good people, really nice, good people. Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, good. I like that. My world is getting small. I love it.
I love that when people. I do love a good set of connections. When you realize they're all not too far apart, especially in this industry.
Right? Yes, I know it. Oh my goodness. Well, we have been talking with Patti Doyle, CEO of Rumi Spice. Patti, where can people learn more about you and Rumi?
Yeah, we'd love to have everybody go check us out at rumispice.com. Just like it sounds, rumispice.com, and check out the products we have there. And then shortly we'll have some new things to share with everyone.
Thank you so much for your time today, Patti. And I do believe that we will see each other at Expo East. Is that right?
Yes, we will have a booth there, but have some free time to connect as well.
Excellent. Well, I'm so happy we finally got to connect, and I look forward to seeing what's coming up here through the rest of the year. And for you listeners, thank you so much for your time today. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you next time on the Gooder Podcast.
Produced by Heartcast Media.